Today on Voice of the Valleys, people have been jumping all over a case recently of apparent hypocrisy, particularly with people on the right focusing on racially and religiously motivated gangs, given that Kent police have recently sent 8 people down for over 100 combined years on child abuse charges. Is it a comparable case? We'll go over all of that in just a moment. Not only that, it's been revealed that our invasion is being subsidised by Quota, so our border force actually have quotas to hit for weekly asylum applications to be processed. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, a World War II vet is making waves by saying that this country was not worth fighting for, and we'll go over exactly what he means. All that and more today on Voice of the Valleys. Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys yet again with your host, friendly neighbourhood far-right thug, always tyrannical, unless he's not, Mr. George Cresswell. Hope we're all doing well. Going to get straight into it today because we have a lot to get through, not a lot of time, and yeah, just get straight into it. So first things first though, ladies and gentlemen, I put out a post on YouTube earlier on today because it did seem that the sword of Damocles came down on the head of a famous, relatively famous, I think he had about over 260, 270,000 subscribers on YouTube by the time the sword of Damocles fell on him. His name is Zuma Historian. And he was a very controversial figure in the eyes of most, I would say. Obviously, I'm saying was as if he's dead. He's not dead, but his channel has since been terminated after he posted a video. One of the videos he described as Zuma slop was about people's attitudes towards a certain, mustachio dictator of the 20th century. In particular, figures like Myron Gaines and people like that tend to speak kind of fondly of him. Right? And actually pointing out that you might want to sort of rethink that, so to speak. That video got taken down, but his entire channel got swiped down and is nowhere to be found. So, yeah, the sword of Damocles has fallen on him. Now, I don't really know what to make of his content. In my post, I actually put out that because we've been told so many lies about history, right, it's very difficult to find the truth of what to believe, right? There were some videos which I watched of his that I thought were quite insightful, particularly an hour-long video in which he was just reading out, as we'll get onto at the end of the show, ladies and gentlemen, testament from World War II veterans, right, about their experiences not only during the war, but how they've seen the country decline up until the modern day and their feelings on it, right? About an hour-long video detailing a lot of veterans' perspectives. And not only that, he'd done a good few videos which seemed to be one of the premier sources of information that I could find on Rhodesia, right, and the fall of Rhodesia in particular, and what Rhodesia was actually like. In terms of other things, in other of his views, which he tends to be quite open about, if you follow him on X, as far as I know. I'm not sure whether I would, fully agree with. But, the main thing is that it shows that, particularly if you're on the right, and with how censorious and politicized YouTube is in particular, the sword of Damocles can fall on us any moment. And I've been uploading a lot of videos recently. A lot of the topics we discuss are obviously very sensitive topics. Even when I try to redact them, I try to remove the words or whatever that YouTube doesn't like, they still get put as limited in terms of monetization, and many of my videos now have to go to additional review and all of these things. I don't know whether that means the writing is on the wall, at least in terms of being monetized. I don't know. But point being is that if you're on the side of politics, the sword of Damocles can fall on you at any moment. Happened to Stephen Crowder, happened to many other people on the right of politics in the UK, in the US, and all around the world, right? The heads behind YouTube really haven't all changed that much, right? We saw that they got rid of Fuentes and Alex Jones as soon as they come back on the platform after YouTube saying, we're going to stop all the censorship and all of the stuff, right? So point being, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't already gone to follow me on the other platforms where you'll find this show, namely Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and in particular Rumble, right, Rumble Video, please go and do that right now. Pause the video or leave it playing in the background. Go to rumble.com/Voice of the Valleys. The link is down below in the description. And just make sure you follow me there, because not only, if the sword of Damocles falls on me on YouTube, you'll always have somewhere where you can find me, but not only that, the content over there is a lot more uncensored, right? And there may be one sometimes where, when I'm creating clips and stuff like that, I'll create one for Rumble in which I try to leave all of the words in exactly as I say them, right? And then some of the words, obviously, I have to take out for YouTube, and sometimes I'll end up uploading the wrong one to Rumble, and you might have the, the one with the little mute in certain words on Rumble and stuff like that. For the most part, Rumble is a lot more uncensored, and obviously I get a lot more freedom on there. So if you haven't already gone and followed me on there, please go and do so. And yeah, on with the show straight away. It's just whether you agree with Zuma's historian or not, whether you think his views are absolutely abhorrent or not. The point being is that, as far as I know, he didn't commit any crime, right, with the things that he was saying, right? He didn't commit any crime. It was just giving an alternative perspective of history, many ways one that was completely untold. Right? At no point, for example, did we learn throughout all of our education about Nazi Germany and all of this stuff. At no point when we were talking about the war did we learn about the firebombing of Dresden and the certain atrocities that happened during that time. Right? My perspective on World War II has changed quite a bit. But the point being is that he was just providing more information or a different perspective on history and on the political orthodoxy that we've been, ingrained into and having to take from that. And I think that in some ways is a good thing, because the truth will stand on its own merits every single time. And the facts will support whatever position the facts support, right? That's what debate is for, that's what free speech is for, and all of this stuff. But it did force, his presence on the platform, for example, did force defenders of historical and political orthodoxy to earnestly defend those ideas, and they could not get away with just labels and names and all of this stuff, right? Because he had a wealth of content. Some of his videos, I didn't watch all of them, but some of his videos were like 6 hours long. They were like split into segments, and then he would stitch them all together, and they'd be like 6 or 8 hours long, right? So there was a lot of content, a lot of information. Seemed like he'd be quite an interesting guy to actually talk to. Right. But yeah, the point being is, sword of Damocles can fall on us for any reason at any point, ladies and gentlemen. So make sure you go and follow me on Rumble as well. While you're over there, feel free to sign up to locals and maybe even just join the non-paid members page as well. And then if you feel up to it, maybe you can go into the Rumble's members area, or you can go over to Patreon, or even the YouTube memberships if it happens to survive. But yeah. On with the show today, ladies and gentlemen. It's a little bit of a preamble to get us into today. First things first, I wanted to go over, ladies and gentlemen. There's been a lot of news headlines that have been breaking, a lot of stuff we've got to go over. Biggest things which seem to be making the rounds at the moment, particularly with regards to the lefties on X at the moment. There's a story which we need to go over that they have really latched onto, right? And I've been trying to point at it, being like, oh, look, the right don't care when these things are the wrong race and the wrong place and whatever else, when obviously we do. The vast majority of people, regardless of political persuasion, will be against all forms of child exploitation and abuse. Now, we've seen that some people, for various reasons, have wanted to cover up certain elements of that, whether it's for racial reasons, whether it's for political reasons, whatever it may be, whether it be for grievances against the British people. The Britain is a reality. It is just a reality, unfortunately. But what's happened recently, the story that a lot of the lefties in particular have really latched onto. I'm just going to move my webcam slightly over so that I can, there we go, I'm a little bit more centered now. There we are. Story that they've latched onto at the moment is that Kent police have recently announced that they have sent multiple child offenders, 8 in total, down for a period, combined total, of 100 years. Right, so I'll play you the video in the background for you now, ladies and gentlemen, so you can see some of the things that have been again breaking in the news cycle, so to speak. So you see, 8 child offenders have been jailed for 100 years. You have one here. Roy Humphreys was sentenced to 22 years imprisonment. Right, so I'll let the video play and we'll go through all of these. Stephen Riley was sentenced to 19 years imprisonment. We'll break down all the details in a little bit. Glenn Swanson sentenced to 18 years. Then you have George Payne Woodham was sentenced to 16 years imprisonment. So you have a wide age range of these convicted, ladies and gentlemen. Lee Balsham was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. Lucifer Hunter was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. What kind of parent names their kid Lucifer? And then Kevin Scarnell was sentenced to 2 years, 8 months imprisonment. And I believe this is the last one. Andrew Cullis was sentenced to 2 years and 4 months imprisonment. Now, obviously, all of these have been sent down at the same time. And I think many of us got the misconception, and the lefties have jumped all over it, that this was a gang of sorts. This was an example of a white child exploitation and gang. And obviously they jumped all over it, where the people, they're just racist. They don't want to report on this. Well, it's important that we report on it, right? And we shouldn't be afraid of reporting on this stuff, because we stand against all forms of degeneracy like this, especially when children are involved, right? Especially when you have child victims. Now, The one misconception that I initially got is that this is not actually a gang in and of itself. So there's one bit of separation. These are not the same issues as to what we have seen with the systematic and racially and religiously motivated systematic operation targeting specifically, for the most part, British children that predominantly Pakistani Muslim men were engaging in, and the communities covered for it. Families and communities protected the people that were doing this. They tried to shield themselves from being prosecuted, so to speak. And we've seen all instances of clips. I believe there's one outside Rochdale police station where they went and rioted after one of their community got apprehended for, I'm not saying it's to do with these issues in particular, right? But one of them got apprehended and brought to the police station for a crime. And not long after, they were released because they were about to riot outside the police station. They were throwing all manner of things at the police station. They were trying to kick the doors down, all manner of stuff, right? So we've seen police weakness. All of these other things have just further emboldened these problems. But it's good to see, no matter who it is, no matter where they're from, the child predators are getting sent down. Now, let's break down some of these cases, shall we? So, as I mentioned, you have 8 people that have been sent down in all. And a lot of it, or at least with regards to one of them have gone to prison. Roy Humphreys was 82 years old when he was found guilty, right? So all of his crimes are in the past. I actually got Grok to break down them all for me. But on the Kent Police website, which you can find this link down below as well, Roy Humphreys, for example, there was physical abuse involved, obviously, abusing 2 boys in the 1970s and another in the 2000s. He was found guilty at Maidstone Crown Court and on 15th of October was sentenced to 22 years. So odds are he's going to die in prison, okay? And nobody's going to miss him. Let's make no mistake about it. Nobody is going to miss him. Stephen Riley, or Stephen Riley, not sure to pronounce it, was found guilty of using threats of violence to silence and maintain control over a victim for nearly 2 decades, starting in the early 2000s, so presumably that will be up to the modern day. On Thursday, the 16th of October 2025, the 63-year-old was sentenced to 19 years imprisonment and will serve an additional 3 years on licence, assuming he makes it to the point where he is eligible for his release. Now, I don't know, with what we've seen seemingly with the justice system in this country, where they're losing prisoners, particularly in regards to seemingly foreign offenders and knife criminals. Who knows? They might either be just mistakenly released or let out early under the prison release scheme because they've got to make more room for thought criminals. But at the end of the day, it's good that people are getting sent down for this. Then we have Glenn Swanson, was already serving a jail term for child offences, but another thing came forward. On the 22nd of September, the 63-year-old was sentenced to 18 years imprisonment at Maidstone. That's the Crown Court. He will serve this in addition to his custodial term. So we can assume again that he is likely to die in prison because he was already serving a jail term for child offences. Notice he'd already gone to jail for this crime, ladies and gentlemen, which is another key difference as to why many people are so aggrieved over what's been allowed to happen to British girls at the hands of Pakistani men, predominantly Pakistani Muslim men, and that is the fact that many of them never faced a jail cell, and in fact many of the police often cooperated with them to aid in the abuse of the girls as well. George Payne Woodham subjected a child to abuse over several years. The 21-year-old was convicted after a trial and sentenced to 16 years imprisonment at Maidstone Crown Court on Friday the 12th of September. He will serve an additional 4 years on licence under the terms of an extended sentence. Lee Balchin, this is the last one we have on here because the others were online offences, was found guilty of regularly plying a child with alcohol and drugs to render them nearly unconscious before them. The 55-year-old was sentenced at Maidstone Crown Court to 15 years imprisonment on Monday, the 13th of October, 2025. Particularly heinous, that one. Thank God all of these disgusting criminals were put away. Society is a lot better off for it. I'm going to wipe my glasses a minute, ladies and gentlemen. There's a big smudge that's doing my head in, and I can barely read off my laptop here. Okay, so those are the physical abuse cases, according to Kent Police. The others here, then, are online abuse cases. So Lucifer Hunter, honestly, if you're going to name your kid that, your parents already hate you. You didn't get a very good start in life, did you? Unless, obviously, he changed his name by Deepole or something like that, or Deepole. Was found guilty of pretending to be a 16-year-old boy to 4 young victims on social media. The 24-year-old was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment at Canterbury Crown Court on 17th of October and has been made the subject of a sexual harm prevention order for 15 years. So parents, obviously, that is the law. Your notice basically to make sure you keep an eye on your kids' devices and make sure you keep an eye on who they're talking to, especially in today's age. You don't know who they're talking to, and anybody can pretend to be anybody, especially with, God knows what's going to be happening and how these people are going to use like AI tools and stuff like that. So please make sure you are being vigilant. And trust me, I hated what I perceived to be helicopter parenting when I was a kid, but I see the value of it now, and I see why now, especially in the technological age. It's not the latchkey age anymore, where you can go to bed and leave your doors unlocked and everything like that in most places. It's not like that anymore, but now obviously you have to deal with cyber threats. So make sure you keep an eye on your children's devices. Kevin Scarnell used dating and social media apps to bombard what he believed to be a teenage boy daily with explicit messages and arranged to meet him for sex. He was sentenced at Maidstone Crown Court on 16th of October to 2 years and 8 months imprisonment. Many could argue it's not long enough. And finally, Andrew Cullis was found to be in possession of a USB containing explicit images of children during a routine sex offender management check in February 2025. So obviously this guy was already known. He has been sentenced to 2 years and 4 months imprisonment at Maidstone Crown Court on 17th of October. So that's the breakdown of what has actually happened in this case. We have a mix here of conviction for crimes that have happened in the past, which is good. Don't believe crimes like this, such as child, should ever have anything like a statute of limitations or anything like that. It's impossible for those children who, I'm not sure how old some of them would be in their, if they were children at the time, some of them potentially in their 50s or 60s now, they've had to carry that through their entire life. They can never undo that and have that undone. They've just got to find ways to come to terms with it. It's not like you've been defrauded of money, which then you can eventually earn back, for example, even though you could have been defrauded out of it by a scumbag or something like that. There should be no statute of limitations for these crimes. So it's good that they've gone down. It's good that they've gone down. And it does set, in my opinion, some pretty good precedents in ways that I don't think the left are necessarily going to like in many instances. Because one of the biggest sets of evidence that they used coming from these brave victims that came forward, right, pardon me, was witness testimony, or victim testimony, not witness testimony. Well, I suppose you could say they are witness to their own crime as well. Victim testimonies and statements were the main source of evidence that was submitted in support. So first things to ask, ladies and gentlemen, when we're trying to make comparisons, first off, that this was not a group of people working together to systematically abuse young girls or young boys for whatever sex the victims were, doesn't really matter, right, for racially and religious reasons. And it doesn't seem that the community covered for them or anything like that. It just assumes that the crimes went unnoticed, whether they, as we said in the second episode, in the second perpetrator, they intimidated the victims into silence, right, regardless of what reason it was, whether the crimes just went unknown and unprosecuted. This wasn't these people working systematically hand in hand with each other. These are 8 isolated cases, and it's important to present them as such if we want it to be factual, right? So there's no instance of these people working together to take advantage. Seems to be predominantly young boys together. Okay, that doesn't seem to be what was going on. Now, another thing that we need to go over is some of these are historical cases. Right, and this actually sets, in my opinion, a pretty good precedent. So Roy Humphreys, as we mentioned, was sentenced to 22 years for abusing 3 boys, 2 in the 1970s and another in the 2000s. And again, if we have a look, because I don't believe in any of these cases, especially in the historical ones, there's not going to be any physical evidence that lays around for this long, right? So what was actually used and is seen as credible enough to result in conviction was victim testimony and statements. So, for example, Roy Humphreys, the case relied on testimonies from 3 victims who came forward recently. They detailed accounts of the abuse over decades were presented at trial, leading to a guilty verdict. No physical evidence was mentioned, highlighting the sufficiency of survivor statements in historic prosecutions. Now, if you're wondering, if I can't help but think, ladies and gentlemen, I'm like lisping a little bit, and that's because I was eating some food the other day and I chomped down really hard on the inside of my mouth. So it's actually kind of painful to talk at the moment, especially because as I talk, my teeth are actually scratching on the one bit of the inside of the lip on this side here, where the wound is, and it hasn't fully healed yet. It's actually extremely painful, extremely sensitive. So if I look and if I'm sounding a little bit off, please bear with me. Please bear with me. Now, Stephen Riley. Initiated by a victim's report in January of 2025, the conviction stemmed from the survivor's testimony about multiple offences over many years. This was deemed credible by the jury after a full trial. And then in Glenn Swanson's case, a new victim's statement reported while Swanson was already in prison for prior similar crimes formed the basis for the additional conviction. This demonstrates how fresh disclosures can revive and substantiate historic cases. In Payne Woodham's case, the 21-year-old, the victim's disclosure to a school worker in September 2024 triggered the investigation. Her testimony at trial detailing the assaults was key to a guilty verdict on all charges. And finally, in Balchin's case, the one who was drugging and children between the ages of 12 and 15. The victim's 2023 report led to charges, testimony about the abuse, including forced drug and alcohol consumption, injections, which were believed to be heroin, and in remote locations, were sufficient for conviction at trial. While medical or toxicological evidence could theoretically corroborate drug use, none was explicitly cited in the reports. Also, I'm not sure when this actually happened. It's victims 2023 reports. Obviously, a lot of drugs, they don't necessarily last in your system for that long, depending on what the substance is itself, and especially if it's repeated. I suppose the symptoms get a little bit, you get used to the symptoms, and as a result then that's why people need more of the dose, right? As they get used to a certain dose and it doesn't either hit them as high or the symptoms are a little bit less, they're more tolerant of it, they've got to go up even more. In terms of how long these drugs would remain in their system, depending on when he was caught, and depending on how long it had been since like the last assault or whatever, you might not be able to get the actual toxicological evidence. So what we're seeing here, ladies and gentlemen, is in this instance, the victim testimony was sufficient to result in conviction. And obviously, provided it's true, provided it's not a false testimony, nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. Different in cases where it's been false accusations and people have been convicted and had their livelihoods and their entire lives in many instances taken away from them on false accusations, right? These are true. If this is true and these things did happen, then it's good that they were believed and that the perpetrators were sent down. Well, that sets a pretty good precedent, doesn't it, ladies and gentlemen, for historical cases of abuse where victim testimonies were not taken as serious, where victim testimonies were not seen as sufficient evidence. We saw many instances of that in the example of the Syrian refugee, Jamal, I believe his name is, where you had many of the people within the school testifying to being abused by him. The one girl saying that he'd assaulted her with a hockey stick, right? And the judge threw it out. The judge threw it out, basically said they were all lying and convicted Tommy Robinson in that case because obviously he revealed the documentary of essentially lying, even though there was plenty of other evidence in there as well. There was the undercover recordings of the headmaster, undercover recordings of, I believe it was a Huddersfield council official or the social worker that worked with Jamal. There was all of this other evidence and it was still thrown out. But yet in these instances, and I'm not complaining about this, people will try and clip this probably if it does end up going viral or whatever, or they'll come back to haunt me later on and say, oh, look, he defended pedophiles or whatever. Not the case. Not the case. But it is important to note that in this instance, that victim testimony was enough to result in conviction. So I was on victim testimony enough to result in many other convictions. Why were the victims dismissed? Why were in many instances the victims of the gangs prosecuted and seen as criminals themselves? But we got a good bit of good news here from this, ladies and gentlemen. This sets a pretty good precedent, doesn't it? I would imagine there'll be a lot of historical cases of those gangs we can go back to now, because using victim testimony, we could probably get some pretty good convictions, can't we? I think that's how we should be pursuing this. Obviously, we know we have a woke judiciary. We know it's two-tier, but the precedent has now been set that all you need, well, I don't even know if it is a precedent, really. You know, I'm not a legal expert, I'm not saying that, but it does seem to me that in this instance now, when we've seen that so many victims were let down because they were not believed, because their testimonies were not taken forward, despite other evidence, mind you, despite the fact that there's so much other evidence at play in here as well, DNA evidence, witness testimony, all of these other things, testimony from family members, all of this stuff, actual physical damages to the girl, some of whom can't have children in the future now, and all of these other things, right? Some of the children who are not here anymore because they were ground into kebab meat and murdered, right? We now have a very good case, if we didn't have a good case anyway, simply based on their victim testimony, to go and throw a hell of a lot of people in prison. Or send them on the next flight home and tell them they'll be met with a relatively inexpensive, very fast-moving bit of metal if they were ever to return, right? Or maybe what we can do, and at this moment in time, I am not in favour of this purely because I don't think the current state that we have should have the power to legislate this, because they will use it for political reasons. So things that I've always been on the fence about. I've always changed my positions on the death penalty because, again, do we want to give the state that kind of power in some instances? I'm not in favour of it with this government. I can promise you that. Just the way that it is, how woke it is, it'll just be, an excuse to write off death warrants like they did in the Soviet Union if we were to do that now. But maybe in a moral and just society for people, maybe we could actually exercise a bit of justice, our own justice, and a little bit of, I don't know, what some of the feminists would probably call toxic masculinity and all of these things, and actually administer some permanent justice. Actually make some examples of these people that have come over here, have done heinous things to our girls in the name of racial and religious supremacy. Maybe we should show them that we're not about that. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, in many instances, remigration is going to be a kindness. It's going to be too kind for some. Remigration is going to be too kind for some, particularly in the case, for example, of this young girl. She's a gang victim in Scotland who's going by the name of Taylor. And Charlie Peters recently sat down to interview her about her experiences and how she was by, again, gangs of Pakistani men. The quote from GB News on the post, which you can find down below, and we'll play a section of the video, but we won't play it all because it's about 4 minutes long. It made me sick to my stomach. The police are supposed to care about you. They didn't even ask questions. There were so many failings in this, but she revealed that the police missed many opportunities to investigate her abusers. Here's just a small section of that video for you, ladies and gentlemen. I urge you to go and watch the full video down below.
And it never.
Taylor's records reveal that at one point, her name appeared in a CSAE investigation and that the police visited her unit, but they failed to properly investigate.
No police officer ever asked to speak to me regarding this exploitation claim that they came to the unit with. I wasn't aware that they had even visited.
Taylor's testimony comes as debate swirls in Scottish politics around an inquiry into gangs in the country. The Conservatives put forward an amendment that would have required research into group-based child exploitation, but it was voted down by the SNP and the Greens. The Scottish Justice Secretary Angela Constance argued that there were no current police investigations into gangs similar to the pattern exposed in many towns in England, where predominantly Pakistani men have targeted vulnerable white children.
Not only was she, there were many instances where the police could have stopped it, but not only that, the councillors in particular, was it Scottish Labour or the SNP and the Greens in particular, they voted it down. They voted any kind of national inquiry down. And that's another difference you're seeing here, ladies and gentlemen, is it didn't seem to be any impediment. Once the evidence was brought forward in the case of the Kent child exploitation, there was no worries about racism. There was no worries about any kind of other religious discrimination. There was no calls that this is, anti-white or anti-British or anything like that, like we've seen in many other instances. right? We've seen that calling, the gangs for what they are, which is racially and religiously motivated, is not only racist, but quote-unquote Islamophobic, right? It's another big difference between what you saw here in the Kent case and what you see hundreds of thousands, if not millions of times up and down England, Scotland, Wales, no doubt Ireland have them as well. And our politicians are all too eager to try and pander to them. This is what we're saying. It's like it's one of the largest child sacrifice pagan rituals I've ever seen, almost. The old artwork of the Canaanites sacrificing their babies to Moloch, that image, right? Go look it up if you want to understand what I mean. It's what they would do in ancient societies, ladies and gentlemen. The thing they would do is they would create this big deity thing, which would have its hands extended out, and what they would do is they would heat this they would heat the hands of this, deity, this, I don't know, like made of bronze or something like that, something that wouldn't melt, obviously, but that would get equally hot. It's a conductor of heat. And they would put babies on this platform when it was boiling hot enough to tear your skin and burn your skin off your body, right? And the baby would be rolling around and obviously wailing in pain, right? Not having a clue what to do, right? And oftentimes they would actually roll off the hands and into the actual flames themselves, all the while people around it would cheer it on. It's kind of like what we're seeing here is just like not outright burning a child to death, but sacrificing them on the altar of multiculturalism and diversity and political correctness instead. And there are so many of these victims, ladies and gentlemen, and this is still going on today. And still, it seems the government is doing everything they can, dragging their heels, kicking and screaming almost, to prosecute some of the worst criminals we've ever seen, purely because they are of a foreign background and have a certain religion you're not allowed to say anything negative about. Here's more examples of this, ladies and gentlemen, from another young lady.
Agree. This gang survivor calls what happened to her anti-Western religious and racist abuse.
When I was a victim, I was raped multiple times, I was beaten, I was tortured, and throughout all of that, I was constantly being racially abused. There was a constant barrage of, you're a white slag, you're a white whore, you're a gory, which is the Pakistani word for white person. So
it's fine when they do it.
The racist abuse was non-stop. The religious abuse is real. I was taught it as a type of othering. Like, our Pakistani girls are good and pure, and they cover themselves, they're virgins till they're married. But white girls are trash, they're whores, they all sleep with hundreds of men, they're all worthless. I don't think.
Many of those girls they abused, mind you, ladies and gentlemen, are, some of them as young as 11 years old, from what I've read, right? More, sort of ranging between about 12 and 14, usually in most of the cases that I've seen. And they apparently slept with hundreds of men. No, in these instances, ladies and gentlemen, they've been forced to. They've been raped by tens or hundreds of men. Tens or hundreds of men, the very same men that are scolding her for supposedly being a white slag, or whatever the term she used to describe a white person, the way that the Pakistanis, describe white people, the term that she used. It's fine when they do it. It's fine when they make you feel othered, ladies and gentlemen. It's fine when they make our young girls feel othered. But God forbid you make them feel othered. Or you'll be hauled in front of HR, or you'll be fast-tracked in front of the courts. They can only make us feel othered in our own country, or in our own countries. They then have free reign to do whatever they want to our young girls, and all the while the people that object to it, the people that try and highlight the racial and religious motivations and the fact that this is part of a broader anti-Western conquest, they are obviously the real bad guys. They are obviously the real bigots. Take note of everyone, ladies and gentlemen, every single person trying to equivocate between what you saw in Kent and not only the historical, but the still going on right now, systematic and torturing our young girls for racial and religious reasons. Both are evil. Both cases are evil, right? All cases of any child exploitation and abuse is evil. All cases are evil, rather. That goes without saying. But it's not the same. The motivations are not the same. The methods and the community involvement are not the same. Our standards of morality and us as peoples and how we see the world are not the same. And like oil and water, some were never meant to mix. Now, we mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, getting off that, so we went over all of the Kent stuff. We've gone over the other cases now where it is not the same and examples to show why it's not the same. There were no racial or religious motivations, as far as I can tell, in any of the Kent cases. It was just pure degenerate paedophile filth. Let's talk about how the state, again, is failing massively to protect us in many instances, being the ones, doing the persecuting a lot of the time, because there have been a lot of victims recently on the state's hands. So when we have here, young Bob was recently outside Villa Park, I believe he was, because of the whole debacle between the violent Muslims in the area and Maccabi Tel Aviv coming over. And I know that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans were already seemingly hooligan-y enough as it is, right? But there was even Ahmed Yaqub, by the way, which seemed to, as far as I remember, Ahmed Yaqub is a lawyer, and he was telling people to go to the ground with baseball bats to be ready to commit assaults, on any quote-unquote Zionists or whatever, right? So he should be a lawyer and he should be doing that, right? But young Bob was arrested for trying to debate people. You can argue maybe it's not the best place, but he wasn't committing a crime. He was talking to people. And as you can imagine, they were threatening his life. A lot of these people. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see an attempt on his head very, very soon. Whether he needs to go that far, I don't know. I don't know how much change he's actually affecting at the moment. I don't know if, for example, Turning Point as organizations like it are going to have the same impact in the UK as they did in the US, right? As Charlie Kirk did in the US. Seems as though he was the real, the front man was the real thing why the organization got off. It was his charisma, it was his personality, it was his skills, right? And his vision. I'm not sure how well it's going to translate over to the current people of the UK and the way that they are feeling. Because something I saw recently, I was watching Patrick Bet-David's show, and he said, based on data that he'd seen, that the broader UK public at the moment is even more right-wing than the Americans on immigration, right? A lot of people are going very, very far to the right wing on immigration, right? But what happened is that he was arrested for having these conversations, right? He was taken away. None of the the Muslims threatening his life or anything like that were taken away, all right? This is a guy here, the footage from Bob, it's one of the Muslims, saying he's right in front of a police officer threatening to kill young Bob. Bear in mind, he's very young, right? I'm not sure if it says how old he is in his actual bio. I don't even think Bob is 20 yet. if I'm not mistaken. I think he's like 18 or 19. After Bob supposedly insulted a prophet with Ahmed Yaqub, the lawyer who was advocating violence, stood nearby, yet the police never arrested these guys. As you can imagine why, ladies and gentlemen. They never arrested these guys. No, of course, they arrested young Bob for daring to try and broach them on conversational grounds. That's where we are in the UK.
I've already put the audio in.
You understand? Now we've walked around our stuff.
I asked this question.
Yeah.
I can't take it up. It's out of person. Sorry, what you said. So why are you watching that bike then?
Why? What is the
Yeah.
Don't walk around.
A Muslim calling someone else a nonce will never not be funny. I'm sorry, I know they can get quite violent when you say that, but a Muslim calling someone a nonce will never not be funny, purely because of who they idolize, right? Purely because of who they idolize. And I appreciate, ladies and gentlemen, in that clip, retrospectively, I didn't realize the audio was actually that bad. We actually reached out, called young Bob, I believe it was, a nonce, right? There's no evidence for that, obviously, but they'll just throw out all of these terms, no matter what, if you have different political opinions. There was that one clip which went viral a little while ago of the police officer saying that just because somebody was recording in a public space, oh, it's a bit Nonce, innit? Insinuating that one of the members of the public was a paedophile. That's a police officer. That's a police officer doing that. But yeah, and again, you only have to look at all of the examples of police liaison officers or whoever it is going to groups of these people who are some of the most violent people that we have right now, who want to do us harm in many instances, and they book outright calls for that. And, you know, they say, how do you want to be policed? Oh, please leave your weapons at the mosque. Please don't do this. Please, please, pretty, please. What if we give you some more of our girls to do whatever you want with? You'll please leave us alone. You please won't riot. You please won't bomb us. Please, 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 please. Yeah, it doesn't work, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't work. And I think people are realizing that now. And they're just about fed up. They're just about fed up of all of this stuff on all sides, because it seems that everyone is forgetting about the British people themselves. This whole Tel Aviv, Maccabi, you know, whatever the hell it is, pro-Palestine Muslim thing that happened the other day has been a really telling moment, because it's been dominated. And again, I don't believe saying this makes me anti-Semitic or anything like that. I don't believe so. But the conversation has been dominated by, again, Jews and Muslims over conflicts that are going on in the Middle East and have nothing to do with the British people. But who are the people constantly getting left behind? Who are the people that are constantly neglected by their own political system, seemingly every one of their own representatives, whether it's because they take the paid flight to Israel to go and touch the bloody wall, right? Which actually I have really no problem with if they want to go over there on their own time and do that. It's a little bit suspicious then when you get, you know, all of the government around, and it seems as though they are doing it because they're kind of beholden to the Israeli government and stuff like that, and it seems as though it's kind of like a modicum of a struggle session, right? In theory, because it's a highly spiritual place, and maybe you are, a Christian, for example, that reveres the Jews, right, and wants to go, show, in some ways, I guess, show respect for like the Old Testament or whatever. I know there's a lot of debate over it, right? There's a lot of debate over it. But that's you. I don't necessarily have any problem with that. I have a problem then when there seems to be so much focus on what's going on in the Middle East and what's going on with, say, Jews and Muslims, and then just a regular British person is like, where's my political representation? Where's the care for me? Right? And that actually then drives up a lot of anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish and anti-Muslim sentiment. It drives up a lot. Because they're like, can't you guys take this back to your respective sandpits in the Middle East and leave us alone? No, we gotta be dragged into it. Because if you ask one set of people, they'll say that set of people is hell-bent on taking over the West. And if you ask another set of people, they'll say the other group is hell-bent on taking over the West. And then if you ask another set of people, they'll say both sides are hell-bent on taking over the West. And I'm like, well, okay, I'd like the West to remain the West. Can you all go away? Can you all take it back to your respective sandpits? We want nothing to do with you. And I understand then why people are getting so fatigued with all of it. But again, it just shows that in Britain at the moment, with the two-tier society that we have, you can threaten to kill and call a nonce with no evidence a young British boy if you're a foreign Muslim, and you get nothing done to you. You get nothing done to you whatsoever. In fact, you'll probably get the police coming around to console you and offer you counselling to deal with the horrific Islamophobic abuse. Because obviously, a Muslim calling anybody a nonce is highly funny, highly hilarious. And all you got to do is look at the example of their pedo prophet, ladies and gentlemen. That's rather hilarious. Now, there's been so many more instances of things happening which are seemingly completely preventable. There's sadly been a man that's been arrested in his 20s, again, nondescript man, from GB News, near the scene of a young woman who was in critical condition after getting stabbed in the neck in an unprovoked attack. It's literally, like I said in my last clip, ladies and gentlemen, which is one of the clips that YouTube went, you're getting limited ad revenue on that, which fair enough, if that's what advertisers are like, I don't care. But again, it's one of the ones had to go to additional review and then those things. So again, Sword of Damocles above my head, ladies and gentlemen. Go follow me on Rumble and make sure you follow me on all the other platforms as well. It's literally a stabbing, a terror attack, a plotted terror attack, or whatever else every single day, multiple a day at this point. So a woman has been in critical condition after she was stabbed in the neck in what police have been called an unprovoked attack in Smallbrook, Queensway in Birmingham. Shortly before 9 p.m. on Friday, there was a report of a stabbing. The force arrested a man in his 20s near the scene, and he remains in custody. The chief inspector, detective inspector, said, "We believe this was an unprovoked attack and we are working to understand why it happened. We will have officers in the area today to continue our investigation and provide assurance. We're not currently looking for anyone else in connection with this incident." So I just want to know, is this a person that was, mistakenly released from prison or whatever? Or is this a person that shouldn't have ever been in the country because they're an illegal migrant? We don't know at this point. That's the thing. We don't know. Was it a person that has been referred to prevent many times? Who's to say? At the moment, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if anything would have changed by the time that this episode gets published, right? Something may have changed by the time this episode gets published. But yeah, this is literally every single day at this point. And in particular, this instance has resulted in a 19-year-old girl losing her life by a repeat offender. So a gentleman by the name of Mohammed Azim, who's 41, has been charged with the murder of a young girl, 19 years old, by the name of Lily Whitehouse. Lily Whitehouse. This was it also in Birmingham? This was in Oldbury, in Park Street in Oldbury, around 9:15 p.m. on bonfire night, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. The thing that makes this particularly egregious, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just looking for the Connor Tomlinson shared a post about this. I'll see if I can find it, because he highlighted that this guy was indeed, he seemed to be a repeat offender, a particularly egregious repeat offender. Yeah, here we go. So the headline in this instance, which appears to be from, I'm not sure what paper this is from, but I'll just bring the screenshot that Connor Tomlinson shared up on screen, and you can find the post down below. I'll link it down below. It says, "Outrage at judge after victim is forced to watch horrific CCTV of attack. She was forced to relive her ordeal at the hands of Mohammed Azim as he dragged her into a factory by the hair and her for 25 minutes. So again, you want to talk about how depraved and disgusting our judiciary is. Made obviously a victim rewatch her ordeal on the CCTV, 25 minutes of what could be potentially the worst 25 minutes of her life. You can't exactly really think of many things that could top that. And other people have put in the comments, for example, that in 2005, he's alleged to have murdered a 41-year-old dog-walking father simply for being white. In 2006, he's allegedly been sentenced to 11 years. In 2012, then, he was sentenced to 16 years for a violent, and there have been numerous, you'll find that post in the comments of Connor Tomlinson's post, linked down below. And then he was out free, walking the streets, and he's now murdered Lily Whitehouse, and this is a video that somebody recorded at the scene.
Scarcity of the scene in Oldbury, where a woman was found dead last night on the 5th of November after police were called at 10 to 10 to Park Street. A 19-year-old woman was found with serious injuries, and despite the best efforts of paramedics, there was nothing they could do to save her life. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Our thoughts are with her loved ones. A 41-year-old man who is believed to be known to the woman has been arrested on suspicion of murder. He remains in custody for questioning. There is a large cordon in place outside AGS Glass Aluminium, and there is a police presence as well.
Yeah, he wasn't just known to her, by the sounds of it. I don't know whether he was actually known to her, right? This disgusting that had no business being in this country, right? He was known to authorities as well. ladies and gentlemen. Why are we tolerating this? And another thing we are tolerating seemingly, but sadly, again, I thought this next one I thought was uniquely an American phenomenon. If you watch the Matt Walsh show, he done an episode a good couple of episodes ago talking about these fraudulent driver's licenses that were being given to Indians in the US and resulting in many fatalities, and seemingly just, again, a spree of them coming like several days, which got a lot of media attention because there was that one guy that just tried to do a U-turn in the middle of like a 3-lane highway, and a car just comes straight into the side of the truck, killed I don't know how many people. I think there was another guy that supposedly fell asleep at the wheel or made no attempt to stop as he careened into the back of a car at like I don't know what speed he was going, but way too fast. Absolutely, destroyed the car, killed everybody inside. It was a family inside, I believe. It was horrendous to watch. Completely preventable. Shows the whole thing about, nation of sanctuary, state of sanctuary, all of this stuff, policies that the left are pushing. They're getting people killed. Think about that when we talk about nation of sanctuary later, and the fact that the Welsh Tories seemingly are supporting it, ladies and gentlemen, as we'll get onto in a little bit. But this is an instance, ladies and gentlemen, of Kuljinder Singh. Kuljinder Singh was arrested and charged with 3 counts of causing serious injury by dangerous driving after a truck that he was driving smashed into the back of stopped cars on a dual carriageway. I'll play you the video in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Be warned, it is distressing viewing, but I think you'll be able to view it, and it might not get anything impacted on YouTube because there's no direct... nobody was dead, I believe, but there's no direct instance of anybody being, harmed that you can see, or the harm would have been done inside the vehicle. This is the kind of stuff that we're talking about now, ladies and gentlemen, when you have this guy in this truck. Whether he's I don't even know whether he's qualified or not to drive this truck. God knows, right? God knows. We could be seeing the same thing here now that we're seeing in California and places like it, of these drivers coming here. They're not trained, but our government, because they want cheap slave labor, right? And they want to force British people out of jobs, right? As a de facto form of birth control, because then they can't afford housing. They can't afford to have a family, right? All the while, their population is already dying out, and they're using it as a impetus to drive more immigration. All the while, they're getting people killed. Watch now on screen, ladies and gentlemen. He's not slowing down. Bang! And actually, I will pull this back up on screen a moment. This is the devastation. This is the devastation that was left in the aftermath. You have to wonder was completely preventable. Seems again, circle, circle, square, circle, circle, square. That's a pattern, ladies and gentlemen. That's a pattern. More remains to be seen, but what I thought was a uniquely American phenomenon at this moment in time seems to be making its way down to the UK, and we should be taking this a lot more seriously, because guess what? We can learn, despite the fact that you get called racist, you get called all manner of things. Who gives a shit? I care about people not dying. Who gives a shit? Take the lessons that we can learn from elsewhere in the world. And let's force companies to make sure that they do a full audit of their workers, shall we? Make sure that they're trained. In many ways now, we have to start asking the question. Obviously, we know the British person's waking up to how much they've been conned out of across their life, right? They're waking up to that now. Why couldn't it have been a British person driving that truck? Not saying it would have even been any different. Not saying it would have been any different. But again, why wasn't it? Why wasn't it? Now, more, ladies and gentlemen, because our government only want to make these problems worse. Talk about small boat crossings. Obviously, we know legal immigration is much more of a problem than illegal immigration. More than 1,000 boat crossings since yesterday morning across the channel. This is reported from GB News. This was published on the 7th, which was yesterday. Remember all the lefties saying that, oh my God, look, we've had no boat crossings in like the last couple of days, like the last 7 days or whatever, just coincidentally when it happened to be a storm, ladies and gentlemen, with severe weather warnings, or at least moderate weather warnings. You know, Keir Starmer and Labour's policy quite clearly working, delivering for the British people, no boat crossings. And then we have, as soon as the weather clears, as soon as it's at least somewhat passable, more than 1,000 small boat migrants crossed the channel since yesterday morning. Think about if this was the Battle of Hastings, right? If this was 1066, can you imagine if we had this? Imagine if we had this. Obviously, we got, the British Isles got conquered in the Norman conquest, right? Obviously, that's a thing that happened, but at least they fought it. At least they fought it, right? But can you imagine nowadays they'd be invited in, William the Conqueror charges onto the beach where he landed with his sword in hand, getting his armies ready, and then all of a sudden Harold is ready to meet him there with like his crown and a massive banquet and being like, oh yeah, our people are starving, our people are losing everything, but yeah, we're a state, we're a country of sanctuary. Can you imagine? But that's what we do nowadays. That's what we do nowadays. In fact, we'd be talking to William, and we'd be like, "How many new people you're going to be bringing in every week? We got quotas to hit. We got quotas of foreigners we need to hit." Stay tuned. Alison Pearson has the lowdown on that. But since yesterday morning, so it would have been since the 6th to the 7th, more than 1,000 small boat migrants have crossed the English Channel since yesterday morning. After the arrival of more than 600 on Thursday alone, a further 400 have already crossed or are currently heading towards UK waters. The arrivals are the first migrants to cross for a fortnight after bad weather prevented people smuggling operations in the Channel. And yes, the lefties tried to take credit for the weather, ladies and gentlemen. There is nothing that they have not done that they will not try to take credit for. Throughout Thursday, more than 600 migrants had arrived in UK waters and were taken to Border Force Processing Centre at Dover Harbour. More than 1,000, ladies and gentlemen. You've got to be wondering, why are we not doing anything about this? Well, that's because, ladies and gentlemen, so Alison Pearson recently revealed on GB News, it's because our government has quotas to hit. I'm going to play, it's quite a long clip. It's probably going to, it's going to be closer to 2 minutes, most likely. Border Force and our government, set by the Home Office, now have targets to hit for asylum claims. That's where we are in this country now. We have targets to hit for asylum claims. So what happens is, if the asylum claims are behind, if they're behind on their asylum claims and they get to the end of the week, you know the meme of the guy really fast lifting up the sheet, stamping and doing this, right? The meme of the really fast guy doing this? That's literally our Border Force if they happen to be behind on their asylum quotas later on in the week, and that could mean offenders get pushed through. That could mean, who knows, Al Qaeda and all man of drug dealer, whatever else, weapons traffickers get pushed through. That's where we are in the UK now. We have invasion by quota.
So this particular Afghan man, although there are thousands of them, that Nicky was told, his claim is that he is going to be politically difficult for him to go back to Afghanistan. So his human rights are he can't be returned. But he's been in the park exposing himself, is done for indecent exposure, may well be on the offenders register. She's had people up on cases who they're told you have to get them through, and they're then told, well, if you won't say yes, somebody else will. There's enormous pressure to clear the book, so it's just get them out, and apparently they all want to hit their weekly targets. So Friday is a bumper day for saying yes.
Talk to me more about that. So at the Home Office, they have targets for the amount of asylum claims they need to process.
Individuals.
Yes. And then if they've not hit those targets, on Fridays, they'll just approve people.
Yeah.
But this is nuts.
Well,
there you go. It is nuts indeed. It is absolutely nuts indeed. And now you get to the end of the week, and because you need to hit your targets, you just push through all manner of person, whoever it is. And we know that these people are not exactly good people, ladies and gentlemen. ITV News was over in Calais recently. The guy here that openly bragged about spending 7 years in France, 5 of which were in prison, and that now he's going across on the boat to Britain. Imagine if this was on a Friday, and he's just going to get stamped through with no checks and balance whatsoever, purely to hit a quota target. Why are we quotarizing? And that's not even a word. There's fireworks going off again, ladies and gentlemen. It's the 8th of November, sorry. And my dog is going nuts in the background, as you might hear, because there are people still letting fireworks off on the 8th of November. You could have saved them for New Year's. But there is 7 years in France, 5 of them in prison, and now he's on his way to Britain. Imagine if this was to arrive on a Friday, ladies and gentlemen. He would be straight into a hotel, probably in your community, without even having without even having a single solitary question asked of him.
Are you scared? You have
No, I don't scare.
No?
Inshallah, bi'idhnillah. Allahumma salli ala nabi.
How long have you been in France?
I 7 years in France.
7 years.
5 years prison. I 7 years in France.
7 years.
5 years prison.
He may have been in prison, but these Iraqi Kurds think freedom.
7 years in France, 5 years in prison, and a very angry black Labrador. Yeah, this year's Bonfire Night has definitely turned me into a Bonfire Night Ebenezer Scrooge. Absolutely. However, as you see, ladies and gentlemen, it's not necessarily all doom and gloom. I don't know if you can hear my if you can hear my very distressed doggo in the background. What has happened, ladies and gentlemen? A group from Raise the Colours Operation France, in this instance, raisethecolors.org UK, have actually gone over to France and doing what the French police should be doing. And in many instances, when it seems as though it's politically advantageous to do so, when they can do so for a video, or when they can do so for a photo op, they'll do it. They won't do it otherwise. They're actually going over trying to physically stop the boats from preparing to cross the channel. Notice in this video, the French authorities are nowhere to be seen. The UK government is still doing nothing. This is ordinary citizens, it seems, going over to protect their nation's borders. What does that tell you? What does that tell you about the government, our government? What does that tell you about the French government? What does that tell you? This should give you a little bit of reassurance, though, about a lot of our good men. Despite all the demonization of the feminists and so on, there seem to be a lot of good men that are still prepared to fight for this great land.
Ryan, Raise the Colours, UK. You're not welcome in our country. You're unvetted men. Unvetted men. Here we go. Not one woman, not one child. Going to England. It's a joke.
So you can go and check them out. Their social media will be linked in the post down below. All right, I'm gonna start a petition. I don't know if you guys would support it or whatever. I've over the course of this episode, I've changed my mind on two things. So, I said earlier in the episode, I was, at the moment staunchly against the death penalty. Well, if they was to be introduced for two things, namely letting off fireworks on any night other than Bonfire Night and New Year, and also not picking up your dog off the floor, because I was walking the dog yesterday and stepped in a bunch of it. As she pulled me into the road, I I pulled back and to make sure she didn't get run over because the car was coming. And then, as you can imagine, slipped on something. I was like, oh, I know exactly what I just stepped in. I want to make those capital offences. I've decided. I want to make those capital offences. But, anyway, as you can see, I think it gives us a little bit of reassurance knowing that it's quite clear that the enthusiasm, the knowledge of the threat, and the impetus to go and deal with it, or one of the threats anyway. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen, you can't, I know I've got a little bit of little hair sticking out of my headphones, there we are. You can't deal with the government threats necessarily from the outside of an insurrection. So a lot of the things that are going to have to be dealt with regards to changing policy, changing, the actual politics of the nation is going to have to be done once political power is attained from the inside, right? That's just the reality. But it should, at least threats coming from the outside now that people can, in theory, deal with, that there is a movement building that people are actually going to go and deal with it. And I would imagine as soon as these people come back to Britain, they'll probably be brought in on terrorism charges, right? Obviously, they quite clearly one of the far-right hooligans and all of this stuff. But it should give us a little bit of reassurance because people will see this. More men will want to go and do this kind of stuff, right? Certainly, if the call went out, I would be one of the first ones there. So there's definitely an impetus there, ladies and gentlemen. But this is just a very, very small part. This is a very, very small part. Question does remain at this point, how much is to be gained from it? So how much are you gaining from doing this versus how much are you going to lose by being persecuted from the state afterwards, right? Which is a little bit what I was hinting with the Young Bob incident as well, being like, how much are you gaining from going out and trying to debate Muslims versus then when you get thrown in prison and potentially even brought up on terrorism charges later on, as we've seen them doing all of this stuff, right? And quite interesting in regards to that, the Tommy Robinson case, I don't know if you saw, ladies and gentlemen, the whole point of it was he got charged. It was such a mask-off moment. It was what you were promoting, you know. I'll see if I can find the actual thing. It was a very, very telling moment. Right, there we go. I just found it, ladies and gentlemen. You'll find the post linked in itself. I said that it was a very telling admission of pure political persecution, which we've seen in this country, is that GB Politics reported that it was the judge that said in Tommy Robinson's case, quote, "It was actually what you stood for that caused you to be targeted." So that's where I was getting to, you know, is that we're seeing in the UK, it's what you stand for that is getting you targeted. Right, I'm not sure I was going to tie that back to what we were talking about before, but again, weighing up the cost benefit of things, I suppose, especially when you see that it's just the fact of what you were standing for that's causing you to be targeted, and that is, you know, pure admission of political persecution. If you need any more evidence that we have a pure like communist judiciary and government, I don't know what more to offer you at this point. I don't know what more to offer you. However, what I do have more to offer you on, ladies and gentlemen, is more that the destruction that the Welsh government want to bring to Wales. And this is where we're going to start rounding it out now. It's quite interesting, right? You think the Party of Wales would want to preserve Wales's customs above all. You think this would be the thing that happens, right? If they go all about the English colonizers, we covered before that obviously one of Plaid's representatives is a lady that by her own admission was born in England, has not an ounce of Welsh ancestry, and then she's coming over here and telling the Welsh people who they are, and what being Welsh is all about, right? And there seems to be very little separatist outrage about it, which I find quite telling. However, Plaid Cymru's Bethan Syed, in this instance, Bethan Said, however you say it, obviously Plaid are all very openly pro-nation of sanctuary, right, saying asylum seekers benefit Wales, but in reality they really don't. We're doing, you know, best you could say we're doing perfectly fine as it is. At worst you could say there's a lot of things we do need to change about the way that we view things, but not in the way that Plaid would like us to take it. Right, not in the way that Plaid want to make our culture even more foreign, right? Obviously, they say they bring in new cultures, rituals, foods, and tastes, and all of this stuff. But we don't need it. They have the recipes. We don't need them. It's as simple as that. Anyway, I thought they were coming here because they were fleeing persecution. I thought that's what an asylum seeker was. I thought they were coming here because they needed shelter, and they needed a bit of sanctuary from persecution. Not because they are going to bring us new cultures, rituals, foods, and tastes. That makes it sound like they're here to stay. That doesn't sound like an asylum seeker. That sounds like an immigrant. Ooh, maybe nation of sanctuary is an immigration policy. Here is her bemoaning that shops in Neath, in Port Talbot, do not sell halal food, and she wrote to Tesco demanding that they stock it. They've written to Tesco, ladies and gentlemen, the Party of Wales have written to Tesco demanding that they endorse one of the most brutal, not to mention religious, you know, in the religion of Islam, one of the most stringent religious practices that they do, the way that they slaughter things, which, by the way, could, if people are Christian, people of other faiths, who have been told to eat a certain way or been told not to engage in certain customs of other faiths, would actually be putting them in a state of serious faith turmoil. Plaid don't care. They only care about appealing to one demographic, namely the Islamic demographic in this instance, because their bargaining thing, their whole thing, the thing that they're banking on is bringing in a bunch of these people through from elsewhere in the world, because they will be extremely large voting blocks, extremely large families, multiple wives. It makes an extremely large voting block, and they don't care if they have to sacrifice the entirety of the Welsh population to do so. They do not care. They only care about votes. They're seeing this purely as a numbers game, and that's why they are championing the initiatives that they do. It's why they want to see white Welsh girls in hijabs, right? It's why they are now demanding that Tesco stock halal food, despite the fact it's one of the most brutal slaughter methods, we've ever seen. Not to mention, it's very intolerant for all the talk of tolerance and diversity. It's very intolerant that you would try and force this on people that really it has nothing to do with and could potentially bring them into serious religious turmoil with their faith.
We simply don't have anywhere that sells halal food. So the positivity I would like to bring is that not only that we help them, but they can help us, be it through new cultures, be it through new ways of living, new rituals that we can learn about, new foods, new tastes. For example, in East Talbot, we simply don't have anywhere that sells halal food. I mean, they've got to take the trip to Swansea then to find that food. I've written to Tesco, I've written to different outlets in East Talbot if they can provide halal food, and they simply say no, they don't have the demand.
They simply say no, they don't have the demand. And then she goes on to say, how are they accommodating those very people who are most vulnerable? They're always most vulnerable, ladies and gentlemen. Well, we're told that these people are vulnerable, right? We're told that these people are vulnerable. This is another thing that I wanted to bring up that I've only just thought to bring up now, but it's something I quote posted on X. Because I think you'll see this now, ladies and gentlemen, in many instances. I hope that this will at least now... Oh, where is it? I responded to it. Here we go. So, a person on X, and you'll be able to find the post linked in the fact that I quote posted it. Very famous account with 328,000 followers. Quoted Samantha Smith, and obviously Samantha Smith was... responding to Adil Ray, who is in hot water at the moment for his comments over Sharia law, and also fact that he got caught in a bit of a sticky situation with our World War II veteran, which we'll go over at the end of the show, right? And Samantha said, "Hi Adil, Sharia law is not social justice, welfare, fairness, charity or cohesion. It's in fact the opposite. Under Sharia law, six-year-old girls get sold off to men old enough to be the grandfathers that beaten and impregnated." She goes down the laundry list, right? Well, there's an account called X, on X called Abia, or Abia, however you say it, Abia Khatib, right, who resides, if her location is accurate, and by her own admission, she resides in a Muslim country, that being, in this case, Amman. She says, "I was born and raised in a Muslim country and is still living in one. I had access to the best education my parents could give me. I chose my school, my partner, my clothes, my friends. I've traveled the world. I own my own house, car and business. I live freely as any woman elsewhere, maybe even better. And under Sharia law, I divorced my partner within a week, got all my rights. So honestly, I have no idea what the f*** you're talking about, except that you are a clueless bigot." So, that was the response for Samantha's trouble for going on about Sharia law, which many of us are opposed to. Plaid are obviously seemingly very pro of, and they want to bring more of these people in. But I've just been told by Plaid these are some of the most vulnerable people on the planet. By this person's admission, it would seem. And that's why actually I said in response to this, many people have had their empathy preyed on by narratives around how awful these places are, particularly for women. That was the whole line that Klinos Mehdi went down when she said we need to bring tens of millions of Afghan women here. That was the line that she went down, how awful it is for women, as an excuse to drive mass immigration. That's why many people feel guilty at the prospect of mass deportations at remigration. And as I responded to this person, ladies and gentlemen, I would hope that this is the case for you, particularly when you're looking at our brothers and sisters in England who are dealing with this problem more than anyone at the moment, and why they should be receiving our full support. You would have just removed many people's perceived guilt over those things with this post. And that's all I have to do there is thank you. You know, Mrs. Abia or Mrs. Abia, however you say it, you've just removed, in my opinion, you've certainly removed a lot of mine, because I was under the impression that we're going to be sending a lot of people back to absolute, that we were going to be sending people back to horrific oppression and that there was this serious moral quandary about it. Well, if what you say is true, which obviously I take it with a heavy degree of skepticism, but acknowledging also there's certain things we have to do to preserve our people and preserve our land and preserve our culture, ladies and gentlemen, preserve the survival of our people, that the perceived guilt, a lot of perceived guilt, is gone. Because why, ladies and gentlemen? If it was so oppressive and it was so evil, and it was so bad, why would those people that come from those places want to make our countries like this? If they want to come here to supposedly be free of the oppression of men and whatever else, they want to be liberated and all these other things, why then do they campaign on initiatives that turn our home more like this? Maybe it's because they were never fleeing anything in the first place. Maybe it was because they were integral part of taking somewhere over. Obviously, whether it's violent or whether it's a violent hard takeover, hostile takeover, or whether it's more of a slow burn clandestine takeover, which is what it's been in the UK, you have to populate those lands. And as a result, then you need your people to go to those places so that you can take your family there and then they can repopulate in those areas. And that's how you expand and ensure the expansion remains and continues. Maybe that's what it's about. Maybe it's, again, another case that we've seen time and time again of our politicians selling us out for their own aims, which are then going to come back and bite them later on. But they're hoping that they can get enough in terms of fiscal and in terms of whatever other resources they need to avoid the consequences. They don't care what happens to us. They don't care what happens to us. That's the bottom line. And the Tories don't seem to be any better, at least in Wales, it seems. I covered before, what was his name? Councillor, I forgot his name, George something. The guy who refused to back down when going on about small boat migrants, and they tried to guilt trip him, they tried to gaslight him, all of these things, right? And he refused to submit, he stood his ground, which was good to see. However, the Welsh Tory MS Tom Giffard, right, who is a Welsh Conservative Senedd member for South Wales West and Shadow Council General, has backed the woke plan to decolonize public spaces, quote unquote, decolonize public spaces. And he says that he essentially supports Plaid Cymru and Labour's plan to destroy our history and our culture. Says a lot when you have, Conservatives and Plaid Cymru being possibly like some of the furthest left that you can go on many issues, right? And the Conservatives and Labour all nodding together on something. It's like, how interesting is that? We must stop as well, ladies and gentlemen, seemingly the woke Welsh Tories.
Also like to focus on some of the points in the anti-racist Wales action plan published by the Welsh Government earlier today as it relates to your portfolio. Under the Culture, Heritage and Sport section, it stated one of the goals is to, quote, review and decolonise our public spaces and collections by appropriately addressing the way in which people and events with known historical associations to slavery and colonialism are commemorated, acknowledging the harm done by their actions and reframing the presentation of the legacy to fully recognise this, end quote. And I agree with that. And what I think is important here is that the public at large buy into that as well. Also like to focus on some of the points
you them and leave our history alone. How about that? How about that? So you're gonna decolonize. You're gonna start, taking down our statues like they've done in America, like they took down the statue to Robert E. Lee and things like that. You're gonna start taking down our cenotaphs. Gonna take down markers to our history to decolonize it, quote unquote. Is that what you're gonna do? Really? Says a lot when the Tories already have a bad enough reputation in areas like mine because of Maggie Thatcher and the way she treated the miners and stuff like that. This is only going to make it worse. And that is it's a difficult thing to kind of reconcile for somebody where obviously you go to the very, very, very far right of the horseshoe spectrum of right-wing politics. You end up with, wanting to do a race-based genocide. You end up with like white totalitarianists and full-on, the hardest of the hardline national socialists and so on. But you come back there maybe a more like just a more tame kind of nationalist position. And then obviously you come back more towards the centre. You have just a regular conservative position like, our culture and our... Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I'm reporting to you from back in Baghdad. I didn't realise that. You have our culture, our heritage, our people, all of these things, our way of life are simply worth preserving and conserving. That's usually what the conservative position means. Not decolonising. That is the loony woke left-wing language. So to hear our conservatives using that is very concerning indeed. And kind of seems that the Conservatives don't have really a clue what they're doing, because you have people like Darren Miller, for example, who was one of the ones that was getting heckled in the Senedd recently, semi-recently, when Charlie Kirk got assassinated, for daring to say that, they haven't even mentioned Charlie Kirk and how much it has impacts on free speech. And when he did, actually, they were reacting very negatively. And all of these things, right? The wokest of the woke, you bring up these things, and you've basically, in their eyes, genuinely might as well have invoked Hitler. That's how they see it. So why are the Conservatives speaking in the same way? Oh, they're weak. They're fundamentally weak. And a lot of these people just seemingly have no spines, and they want to pander to the side that will show you no remorse. We've seen that when every single time somebody apologizes, they're treated even worse, like a school of piranhas when they smell blood in the water. They're just waiting for you to show that one aspect of weakness, and you've basically just given them your head on a platter when you use their language like this. But the thing is, it's not going to be you. It's not going to be you, Mr. Gifford, that suffers for it, is it? No, it's going to be your constituents and the regular Welsh public at large that suffers for it. Seemingly your weakness, and for your pandering to people that will never have your back, that will sell you out in a moment's notice, and will sell all of us out in a moment's notice for their own political gain and for their own ambitions, for their own globalist ambitions. That's who you want to unite with. Are you kidding me? And sadly, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't end there. It doesn't end there, unfortunately, because it does appear that the Swansea Conservatives have actually voiced support for City of Sanctuary. The looniest of the left-wing initiatives, it seems. It seems like the trans agenda has sort of taken a step back. They're trying to focus less on chopping kids' nuts off, chemically at least, focusing more on flooding our communities with a bunch of hostile foreigners for political gain, right? It's the biggest thing to remember, ladies and gentlemen, is that they're doing it for political gain. You might be seeing these people, as you should, as people with lives and with families, right? And you want to, treat them with dignity as best you can, a lot of them, until they give reason not to, even though they're being used in a way that is illegal by our own government. Always direct your ire predominantly back at the government, because it's the government that is enabling it. It's the government that is seeing these people as voting units that are trying to do a number on you. That's how you should see it. That's how you should see it. Always direct your ire, first and foremost, back at the government, treating anybody who we may deem as not supposed to be here because they've come here on what we may deem as illegitimate means, right, by government that had no right to bring them here in the way that they did. You still treat individual people with dignity doing that, and still push for initiatives that resolve that, right? The classic thing, I don't like saying it's a bit of a cliche, but it's not personal, it's just politics, or it's not personal, it's just business, right? But you don't need to necessarily have hatred for any individual person or whatever that comes down, but you absolutely should be, viewing with nothing but contempt the politicians that are enabling it, because they're trying to do a number on you. And that is where Conservative councillor Lyndon Jones criticised the Senedd's Nation of Sanctuary for asylum seekers before voting in favour of making Swansea a city of sanctuary. He is supposedly criticised based on the cost, 55 million. That's why he criticised it. Saying the classic laundry list of things that we would hope would be said could be better spent on health, to benefit everyone, including people who have come to this country. Our objective, and this is Doge Wales speaking here, our objections to the Nation of Sanctuary are not just related to its cost. More importantly, it's about the message the policy sends. Tackling illegal immigration requires a zero-tolerance approach. That means making it clear to people in our country illegally that they aren't welcome, they know that they won't be integrated, and they will be detained and deported. That's like the moderate position. In England, for example, you have people openly calling for remigration purely based on race, right? You have many people in that position is vastly becoming more and more popular. I understand the frustration. I will say that. I understand why so many people are pushing for that right now. It seems to be that gets more and more popular every single day. It is it's a horror story of biblical proportions in England. That's why our brothers and sisters in England should be having our full support, right? But the fact of the matter is, in this instance, they're not objecting to nation of sanctuary on principle. They're objecting to it based on material. They're not objecting to nation of sanctuary in the sense that it could be used to completely eradicate the Welsh people. They're objecting to it based on, it's 55 million we could be spending anywhere else, or we could be spending on other areas. Question is, who's the, if the Welsh people are not here anymore, who's that 55 million going to go to anyway? It isn't going to matter, really, is it? Money comes second to the life of the Welsh people. That's what seemingly Lyndon here doesn't seem to understand.
However, I am concerned about the money spent by the Welsh Government on the nation of sanctuary. It's about 55 million, I believe. But I think it could be better spent on health to benefit everyone, including people who've come to this country. We have a crisis in the NHS, as we know, and you are 500 times more likely to wait more than 2 years in Wales than in England for treatment. And so therefore that money, we believe, could be better spent on that.
Again, not opposed to it in principle, it seems. Not opposed to it in principle. Now, admittedly, I hadn't watched this clip before it came up. I was expecting something a little bit worse, right? But again, to hear that our Conservatives are not objecting to something like nation of sanctuary based on principle, when there's so many other examples as well. You only got to look at California. You only got to look at all of the other quote-unquote sanctuary cities and sanctuary states in America. You only got to look that obviously New York has recently been taken over by, in hilarious fashion, Mamdani pulling the rug out of under the feet of all of his supporters by saying, you're going to get all this free stuff. And in his first campaign advertisement after winning said, those donations you stopped sending us, you can start sending them again now. Truly, truly hilarious. Really pulled the rug out from under all of them when New Yorkers felt that they're going to get all this free stuff. Yeah, government's going to come in and solve it all. And government does as government does and stabs you in the back as soon as it's politically convenient to. But you look at, is it Minnesota, I believe? Minnesota or Michigan, where they had the toss-up between Jacob Frey and Omar Fateh. And Omar Fateh was holding Somalian flag, campaigning in Somalian to Somalians in America. And then you had Ilhan Omar, who beyond seemingly all measure of doubt committed immigration fraud by marrying her own brother to get him a visa or get him a green card, whatever it was. And she's saying that she's a child of Somalia and wants to do best for the Somalian people. And even seeming she'd rather live in Somalia, but you don't see her booking any one-way flights back to Somalia, do you know? Because it's a third world shithole. That's why we've seen things like that. We've seen the nation of sanctuary. We've seen the state of sanctuary policies implemented elsewhere. We should be objecting to them on principle because they are national security threats. It's very, very sad to hear that our Conservatives seemingly do not object to them on principle. Very, very sad indeed. Now, one last thing before we go over. This is a very, very short note. I wanted to bring up something which is a phenomenon in the X space, right? If you go on X a lot, you'll see a lot of this. Bob Morgan, who I'm really surprised hasn't blocked me yet. Harry Eccles has blocked me. But Bob Morgan, who in his X bio says the ramblings of an unhinged leftard, right? And he does not disappoint in that regard, having a Union Jack, a Ukraine flag, and a blue heart in his name, right? One of the common ones that is constantly going on about the supposed far right and people who are opposed to immigration and nation of sanctuary and all of these things. One of the biggest championers of all of the big left causes like Plaid Cymru and all of those others as well, as far as I know, in Wales in particular, but obviously big supporter of like Labour and all of those others, right? Classic left-wing mouthpiece. Classic boomer left-wing mouthpiece, I should add. And this is a phenomenon which you really need to be aware of, ladies and gentlemen, because it's a trap. It's a gotcha they like to think that they can lay, but it really doesn't work. Here's why. So Bob Morgan put up a post saying, hands up who is not afraid or not frightened to go out of their house in the UK, as some want us to believe. And then he has a little hand up emoji thing. Now, you might be wondering, why would Bob be saying this? And surely this is, we hear reports of all manner of horror stories coming out of England and Wales and so on, out of Britain, of all of these people that are scared to go outside. And here's Bob saying that, I'm not afraid, maybe things aren't as bad as they say, But then you look in Bob's bio. And then you find out he's from Beverley, Yorkshire. I think he had his Beverley Parish before, but then he's changed it to Beverley in Yorkshire. Do you want to know the ethnographic breakdown of Beverley, ladies and gentlemen? This is something that people were very quick, myself included, to point out because it is extremely important and really does explain why Bob is not afraid to go outside, or at least not as afraid as many others. Now, many of us, even though we do live in similar areas, ladies and gentlemen, do rapidly see our communities changing, and it's very concerning. But Beverley in itself is split into two parts, Beverley North and Beverley South. Beverley South, which we'll go through first, ladies and gentlemen. Beverley South, as if you'll have a look on screen, what do you notice? What do you notice about Beverley South, ladies and gentlemen? If you are listening, not watching, ladies and gentlemen, Beverley South, right, which is one of two parts of the Beverley Parish where our friend Bob here can reside, is 97.4% white. It is extremely ethnically homogenous and not diverse in the slightest. And if you have a look at Beverley North, maybe Beverley North is the epitome and example of multicultural diversity utopia. Beverley North is, if you have a look on screen now, 96.8%. This is a classic example, something which you need if you support the show and if you agree with the views and whatever else, you can call out confidently pretty much at every turn, because you do not have many of these people that champion at the moment all of these diversity, inclusion, multiculturalism narratives, all of the left's narratives, right? You do not have that many of them that live in said areas where it is much less in terms of the white native population of Britain and the white majority, right? In many instances being a white minority, then championing the same initiatives. It's funny how this is a classic example why I'll never ever take any telling from any of these politicians or influencers or whoever else who live in their comparative ivory towers. And in that instance, ladies and gentlemen, I can somewhat fit into that box as well. Because communities like mine are still very ethnically homogenous, although I think the census is a little bit out of date, and I think things are a little bit, not as accurate as the census would make them out to be. But in comparison to many areas, it is indeed a utopia, but it's undeniable at this point that that is at least partly due to the fact that it is extremely ethnically homogenous. We are all pretty much of the same people. We all know each other pretty much on a first name basis. Most people are very close in terms of families know each other, right? Very tight knit, knowing each other, high trust community. Because we don't have high populations of foreigners that have come in out of nowhere that we know nothing about. And as a result, then, as we've seen in many instances, make no effort to integrate or anything like that as well. At this moment in time, it is rapidly changing, ladies and gentlemen, which is why we had to take into account, especially next year, that in many ways we have to be very cognizant now of how things can change, given how much they've changed already, and that when is our next opportunity going to be after 2026 to really change things at the ballot box, if anything? And if Plaid do get in, the damage that can be done in one single term. I've seen, you know, how much damage Labour have done from Westminster since they've come in. Imagine how much damage Plaid can do for Wales. Imagine how much damage Plaid can do to Wales. It's not going to be good. I can promise you that. It's not going to be good. So please, ladies and gentlemen, please share this episode around. Let's not go down this road. Let's not have these, you know, hoity-toity, ivory tower, liberal, you know, super arrogant, you know, fall on their sword for all the wrong things liberals pissing on the people that they despise, the people on the classes below them from said ivory towers, and telling them that it's raining. Let's not have that. Let's tell Bob, let's tell all the others, you know, Harry Eccles being another one of them, that's why he blocked me. He's very, very similar, ladies and gentlemen. At least not until they go put their money where their mouth is. They won't be doing it because they know exactly what will happen, because they see the same stats that we do. They try to lie about it. They try to lie about all the stats, but they see the same stats in news headlines that we do. They know it in the back of their mind, despite the fact they got themselves into this way of thinking that they'll never allow themselves to be wrong. Never allow themselves to be wrong, and they'll never allow themselves to question the liberal intelligentsia. So until they do, you can tell them to stick it basically where the sun don't shine, ladies and gentlemen. And don't be afraid to call them out if they try to piss on you and tell you that it's raining. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, the thing that has been really making the headlines recently, so much so that even Matt Walsh has commented on it. Hundreds of my friends gave their lives for what? Country of today? It wasn't worth it. 100-year-old veteran of World War II, Alec Penstone, shocks Good Morning Britain hosts in their, in their liberal bubbles, Kate Garraway and Adil Ray, ahead of Remembrance Day, Adil Ray being very much more the chameleon that we thought he was, the, innocent little lingo host, ladies and gentlemen, endorsing Sharia law, it would seem. Funny how that happens, isn't it? And ahead of Remembrance Day, he had this to say, namely, as is the case with many of our veterans, ladies and gentlemen, he is not alone by any means, that his sacrifice, seeing how the country turned out today, was not worth it. It's got many people up in arms, but here's what he actually said. Right, so I've gone and got a clip from ITV or Good Morning Britain itself, ladies and gentlemen. It's got much better volume, so you might have seen a slight cut there, whatever. Here is the fuller extended clip of that interaction, which is very. And the sad reality is, ladies and gentlemen, you never do that whilst one of those people sat over from him is still here. That was a shocking admission, really, because there's so many things that veterans have bemoaned in the loss of this country, namely the normalization of what they would consider many forms of degeneracy. It's like homosexuality, especially the trans stuff, right? Not only that, the fact that they were told that they were going to fight one power because it was an imperialistic colonizing power that was going to take over their homeland, and they would all be speaking German, and they would lose all of their descendants and all of this stuff, and Britain would be colonized and would become one part of the greater German Empire, right? Part of the Third Reich. And they were told that they would secure freedom for their future generations. And what do they see now? When they look around, they see their capital city. They see many of their towns colonized by a different power and the same fascist government in power that they fought against. And Adil Ray, I can't help but think, knows exactly what Alec Penstone is going on about. Because make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, this is just the reality based on the ethnic demographics of Britain at the time this war was fought. None of those that were of Alec's ilk and that were of Alec's caliber, was storming those beaches and were fighting the Germans, fighting their fellow Europeans, mind you, so that their Britain would be made a better home ground for Afghanis and Africans and all manner of other population other than their own, whom they were thinking about whilst they were in the trenches and whilst they were storming the beaches, thinking that they're never going to be making it home again. No, they were thinking of their wives and children back home that they were likely never going to see again. That's who they were fighting for, and the future generations of those people. Future generations of the native British people. Many veterans since then have bemoaned mass immigration, have bemoaned the way that the culture has been usurped, right? Bemoaned seeing, what they would consider foreigners everywhere. Some of these people were the main people that would be up in arms during the Windrush generation and all these others, right? When people were brought to these isles that had no business being here. The great lie that we were told about that is that, you put out the call and we came. There was no call put out. The reality is people were forced here against the native people's wishes. I don't say that with any hatred towards anybody. That's just the reality. They see the country today. They see foreign customs. They can go down likely their streets, especially in the big cities, and not see a native British person. Think, this isn't what I fought for. And in many instances, those foreigners campaign for the same restrictions on British freedoms that what they were fighting for, that they are now told that they were fighting for. Make no mistake, they weren't fighting for a multicultural paradise, ladies and gentlemen. That's not what they were storming the beaches for. And Alec, as I mentioned, is by no means alone. Somebody who put this in the comments as well. There's another veteran who was on camera saying this as well, saying similar things. It's only a short video, ladies and gentlemen, but again, saying that in devastating indictment of all the people that are saying, oh, he's not talking about immigration, he's not talking about any of these other issues, you've hijacked it. Now, make no mistake, he might not be saying it outright, but many, many since then have bemoaned the way that the native populace have declined, right? And in many ways, the country has been ethnically cleansed and colonized and taken over. They literally say, it's not the country I fought for. It's not full of people that they fought for, right? And that's just the reality. That's just the reality. And you can't blame them for feeling that way. They saw their brothers, they saw their friends get slaughtered, right? All the while they were promised that their generations, their future generations, would be free from fascism, would be free from Nazism, would be free from growing up, would be free to grow up and prosper in the land that they called home. But no, then the politicians went over successive generations of government, sold them out, sold out their sacrifice, and sold out future generations of us to foreign interests. That's what they did. That's the thanks for your service. And they see straight through it.
To be honest with you, this is not the country I fought for. In my opinion, anyway, things are different, and I don't know what would today. I think if the same thing was to happen today with the younger generation, I don't think they would cope as well as we did.
And that's absolutely true. And that's absolutely true. Not to mention now, a lot of us are looking back and seeing how much these people got conned out in their future generations as well, and got conned out of their entire country and their entire, what they wanted to leave to their future generations. Why would we go and fight? Why would we go and fight? When our homeland has been taken over, why would we go to Ukraine and supposedly fight the imperialist Russian force? Why would we want to go to the Middle East and supposedly fight the terrorist group in Gaza, or defend Gaza from the imperialist settlers in Israel or whatever? The last major war we were involved in was in many ways the beginning of the downfall of us as a people, the downfall of us as a nation and an empire and all manner of other things. So why would we? Why would we subject ourselves to that again? Not to mention, a lot of the young generation now you have growing up in this country have no love for this country whatsoever because in their mind, and as they know in their blood, it's not theirs. They have no connection to it. They have no reason to fight for it. That's why you see so many of the young generation in the meme videos saying, oh, I won't fight for this country. But like, yeah, I know. Because it's not your country. It's not your heritage. It's not your people that died for that flag. It's ours. But yet it's the same people then that died for that flag, the descendants of those people that died for that flag that the government wants to send away to go die in another foreign land. All the while their homeland is under siege and is being taken over more and more and more. And it's just a rare moment, a rare televised in terms of mainstream TV moment of honesty. He wasn't thinking of Adil Ray when he stormed the beaches of Normandy or anything like that, ladies and gentlemen. And in the back of his mind, Adil Ray knows exactly what he's saying because he did not, Alec Penstone and other heroes like him did not storm the beaches so that then the government could successively denigrate and sell out the country to foreign interests and have it colonized in the name of a foreign religion, many of whom were allied with the very people he fought against. Many people who nowadays have the same grievance against his people that they've always had by virtue of them being infidels, right? And not to mention the racial elements as well. You can't blame Alec Penstone and others like him for feeling the way that they do. Wasn't any of us that sacrificed the way that he sacrificed. Wasn't Adil Ray that sacrificed in the way that he sacrificed. So you could say he didn't even have the right to sit opposite a man of Alec Penstone's caliber. But that was the unspoken bit there, ladies and gentlemen. The country is not the country that I fought for. Because it's not the same England in this instance or Britain that he would have fought for that was a world-leading empire and a world-leading power that was ridding the world of the Nazi scourge, when nowadays it's turned into the same fascist communist government that he fought against. It's just his own government now that's doing it to his own people for the benefit of foreigners. If you went and you made the sacrifices that our veterans in World War II did, and you could see the country now in the clouds as you were trying to not get shot as you were storming the beaches of Normandy, would you have stormed that beach? If you could see forward and see the hundreds of thousands of young girls in the name of racial and religious supremacy, if you could see that the police would not only be in on it in many instances, but they would be hand in hand with the persecutors, that the government would be systematically trying to push more foreigners with foreign ideals, foreign customs, into these positions of dominion, that they would be pushing so hard for the restriction of freedoms of the native British people, that they would be pushing degeneracy through the schools in the way that they have. If you could see all that in 1944, right, do you really think that they would have stormed that beach? Or would you have stormed that beach, rather? Would you have stormed that beach if you could see that? If you could see modern Britain today? Would you have stormed that beach? Have a think about it. Our veterans seem to be quite clear in their answer. Maybe we should take that into account. And that'll do it for today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for watching and listening. Hope you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for watching. Hwyl fawr. We'll see you next time. Obviously, one more thing, ladies and gentlemen, please like, share, subscribe, all of this stuff if you get value out of the show. If you want to reach out or anything like that, if you've got tips, if you got a whistle to blow, if you've got anything like that, then you know exactly where to go. VOTV.tips@proton.me. That is VOTV.tips@proton.me. Sit Down with Joe Marsh coming very, very soon. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. I've got a feeling you're going to enjoy it. And yeah, we'll see you next time. You take care now. Godspeed. It's no secret now that the native people of Britain, in the respective countries that they call home, have been second-class citizens in said homes for a long time. The myriad of external threats that we face, in many instances, have outright taken over, ethnically cleansed, and colonized many of our towns and cities. But who have been the chief villains and chief architects of this story? Who is ultimately to blame for every town or city that has been taken over and colonized? Who is ultimately to blame for every case of religiously motivated paedophilic gang rape? Well, that lies solely at the feet, ladies and gentlemen, of our own governments. But as the native population begin to wake up, as the anger and discontent manifests more and more and more at their second-class treatment in pursuit of their ultimate eradication, the state has turned against them more and more and deployed every asset at their disposal against them, something my guest today knows all too well. My guest today, ladies and gentlemen, is Mr. Joe Marsh, a long-standing voice and figure in British and Welsh nationalist politics, having been involved in EDL, BNP, and Patriotic Alternative, to name a few of Britain's nationalist initiative.
You know, I started out, I joined the BNP years ago when I was like in my 20s. One of the first people when they set up the EDL. I've been with Patriotic Alternative as well. A lot of people know me in South Wales because I'm probably the most well-known far-right activist in South Wales, you know?
Having seen firsthand the destruction of communities like Tower Hamlets, which you can only say have been ethnically cleansed and colonized, Joe, like many, has tried to warn people about the dangers that are being posed by mass immigration, these diversity and multiculturalism initiatives, much to the chagrin of a government that is profiting massively off of the destruction of their own people.
I went to work on Canary Wharf when they were building that, and I saw the state of Tower Hamlets and London is horrific. I saw a lot of crime while I was up there, you know? In some of these areas, it was all the graffiti was foreign, and it was just horrific.
Rival groups of foreign gangs warring on Britain's soil for territory and the ever-lucrative drug trade that often result in innocent people and children getting caught in the crossfire. Not to mention, in many areas, how normalized these crimes have become. A 9-year-old girl getting caught in the crossfire of what appeared to be two gangs of rival Turkish people that were operating in London, like two rival Turkish gangs that were operating in London.
Albanians killing each other in the drug trade.
So really?
Yeah, there's been at least 2 murders in Cardiff of Albanians who've been killed by other Albanians over drugs. I walked down the one night and there's all these takeaways. And I went down to Tesco, went back, went down in the morning. There's all tape all around the Tesco, right? Like police tape. And on the floor, there's all circles drawn on the floor where they've drawn around, obviously, bullet casings, right?
The hypocrisy, the seeming endless stream of left-wingers and liberals that are the first and loudest to champion the supposed success, utopia, that this multicultural paradise of Britain is, when in reality they live in some of the least diverse and most ethnically homogenous areas of the country. All the while, their people that are living in these areas could not be screaming for help any louder. A lot of the people then want to champion a lot of the left's initiatives like diversity, multiculturalism, all of these other things. You then look where they sort of live on the census data, and then you find out that they don't live in these areas. Where they don't live in they live in areas that are very predominantly ethnically homogenous.
Maybe they go down to the local corner shop and he's a lovely bloke and he gives them, you know, a bit of discount and this and that. And that's their experience of multiculturalism. And they think because of that, whole cities and areas need to be swamped.
How the police will do everything that they can to sow discord and create friction in your family to stifle your political activism. All the while, no crimes have been committed, and in many instances, these police are figuratively and potentially literally
in bed with some of the worst people this country has ever known.
A really good case where the police didn't do anything. It was the case of Ian Watkins, prolific paedophile, prolific Welsh paedophile, ex-lead singer of Lost Prophets, recently got stabbed to death in prison. And also Peter and Avril Griffiths as well. We've seen that the police are not only often just not willing to do anything, in many ways they're outright facilitating it, or worst case scenario, as we've seen recently, potentially even involved in it.
We used to go to a pub called Bindles in Barry, right? And it's been knocked down now, right? But they were over there all the time. And one night, me and my mates, they invited us to a party on a boat. I got raided for the insult and racial hatred when I said that they should be searched before going on trains with rucksacks. My children were small then, they had their laptops together. Caused murder for me with her because she was going mental with me because she wasn't involved in anything that I do. The idea is that they want her to have a go at me, make my life hard so that I give up doing what I'm doing.
And some sage advice for the young men of this country who are going to be the ones tasked with saving it. For all of the browbeating, the demoralisation, and the demonisation of successive generations of nanny state government and hyper-vengeful feminists working hand in hand with them, it'll be down to you to save this country and ensure a future not only for yourself, but for your children and grandchildren and beyond.
If you've got a trade, if you're an electrician or a plumber or a chippy or whatever, right, you're bulletproof there, right? This is how I can do what I do. We live in such a tyranny here. You can be arrested for saying the wrong thing. You can lose your job, right? But people need to get themselves a trade, and then because I could move to Edinburgh tomorrow when I could get a job within days.
But it's something I wish that I had done growing up.
No matter where you are, ladies and gentlemen, whether you live in a big city or a rural little Welsh town, you have a target on your back all the same. The target has been placed on your back by the traitors that we have in government. It's England today, it's Wales tomorrow. So if you want to grow up and prosper in the same country that your forefathers had and not have foreigners and foreign customs ruling over you, then stay tuned and be prepared to get active. This is Voice of the Valleys with Mr. Joe Marsh. Enjoy.